What is up, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. Stay tuned for deep dives. I am your co-host, Carter, and I'm with my incredible co-host, Tori, and we are excited because, Tori, we are diving deep into something that is very near and dear to your Nancy Drew heart, and it is the stories.
Yes, I have been really looking forward to these episodes, this conversation, and basically this is going to be one of many deep dives on different ways of talking about the game's writing.
Oh,
So,
yes.
like we're doing the biggest of pictures today, I feel like, with the storylines. And I'm going to be totally honest, like, and I know Carter knows this, but for those of you who maybe don't know my background as much, like, if you know me from Instagram and stuff, you probably know me more as one of the musical people of the Clue Crew, which is like, that's usually my focus. And I jumped right in feet first with doing piano covers and things. But actually my real, like, what makes my heart beat, I feel like what my real bread and butter is storytelling and this kind of thing. Like I actually went to
I
school.
think you like literature or something. Is that right?
Yeah, I went to school for English education, and I love to read. I love literature. Like I take literature classes just for fun. Like this is my wheelhouse, like through and through.
And this is very
So
exciting
I'm very
because
excited.
Nancy Drew games do some very good storytelling and some very unique storytelling. There's like different like waves, I feel like, that it goes through and weaves through its storytelling. So it's really exciting to explore that with you today.
Yes, yes. And once again, we are going to see things rise and fall and ebb and flow and change as those eras shift. So,
Yes.
it all comes back to, I think,
The eras
there's
was like our
there's
foundation.
yes, that's
And that
why, as we told you all, was like that's where we need to start, because we really do think, like, and even just as I was trying to prep these notes, I just felt like I was having epiphanies all over, like just having
I love a good
realizations
epiphany.
that there are some interesting patterns and developments happening over time. So much so that we're only talking about two eras today, because we just decided we cannot. I mean, maybe you all want to listen to us talk for that long, but we figured, you know what, we better break it up. So we're only covering the classic and golden era, because I think, as y'all are going to see, they actually link quite nicely with how their storytelling works. And then, of course, that experimental era that just rode right in and said, let's go crazy. Like, that is a very fitting place to pick up next week's episode. So we got a part 1 and a part 2.
Speaking of the storylines and this era, you have pointed out that there's something very standard with the mysteries in the classic era. We talked about how like it's very classic Nancy Drew. So why don't you just kind of like start us off with this episode on how that falls with storylines and something that you've noticed with the mysteries itself?
Yeah, so what we're going to try to do for now with the classic era, and again, this fits kind of similarly to the eras episode about it, is like we're looking at how groundwork is laid. So we gotta lay a whole bunch of storytelling groundwork for you all with these first 5 games, and then I think everything that comes after will make a lot more sense when you see, like, here's where we started, here's what it shifted to, and noticing whether, like, did this era, like, did it build on the groundwork, did it change it, like, anyway. So, but yes, thank you for mentioning that, Carter, because we touched on this very briefly in the classic era episode, that these games really rely heavily on, like, we're just calling them standard mysteries. And so what we mean by that is, I'll just go ahead and bring it up so you don't have to. Like, let's just go back to The Haunting of Castle Malloy as our example of a not standard mystery, because orphaned girl lives with hermit, becomes like a banshee, has a jetpack, no one's been kidnapped, no one's in danger. Guy fell down
No
like a
threatening
rocket.
notes, no
Yeah, a
ghosts.
rocket ship hole. Nancy launches a World War II rocket. They get married. The end. Like,
Yeah.
that's not your typical mystery.
Which, by the way, I just want you to know, everybody on Spotify is like, I'm here for the Malloy slander. So this is for all you Spotify users right now.
That's not your typical mystery.
It's
Not
not.
at all. Whereas these games, okay, first game got murdered. Okay, how many mystery novels or, mystery
Murder
TV
She
shows have y'all
Wrote.
watched? Yeah, where someone got murdered. Okay.
Murder.
Yes. Yes. Murder She Wrote, Murder She Played. Like, yes. Uh, we have threats. People getting threatening notes. Okay, stay tuned for danger. Then comes sabotage. Technically sabotage is in stay tuned for danger. There's also in, message in a haunted mansion. We have things being haunted. And then also finding a hidden treasure. Like, these are very much more like typical things that you
Mhm.
might expect to find like in a story. Like, you could pick up, say, an Agatha Christie novel, and you could find any number of one of these kind of elements in one of her books. And then, of course, so many mysteries like, oh, it's haunted. That's just a really popular one. So that's kind of what we mean. These games really make no effort to bring in anything like super crazy, like some of those later games do. And then the other thing that we want to note here, and I'm curious, like, Carter, have you read? And like, I guess let's just keep it to, we can keep it to classic and golden era. Like, have you read any of the books that the first like 12, 13 games are based on?
Yes. I definitely know I've read like Secret of Shadow Ranch and like Lilac Inn and like The Hidden Staircase. Well, all those like very early ones, definitely have read those. It's just
Okay.
been a while.
Okay, so like from the classic like yellow hardback series. Okay, which
Mm-hmm.
is that's the bulk of my reading experience with Nancy Drew too, because
Mm-hmm.
I've read all those ones that you just mentioned. But then actually very fitting, I got to it just in time for this episode. I read the Secrets Can Kill book for the first time
Oh, really?
uh, a few weeks ago,
It's like a case file one,
and
isn't it?
yeah, that's the first book in the Case File series. And one of the things that I had heard, like I've seen posts on Reddit about it and elsewhere, is like people have actually done whole like book to game breakdowns, like comparing. Because my understanding is, hopefully I've got this information accurate, is that the earlier games, and I know it seems to be true with the classic era, like the earlier games seemed to be a lot closer in their storylines, like to the books that they were based on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I can definitely like confirm that with Secrets Can Kill. Like definitely, I mean, her interactive did change things, but and names were changed a little bit and things, but even I felt like, oh yeah, I can very clearly see like this kind of got tweaked so it became this in the game. Whereas my understanding is like later games, her interactive got much more involved and like they just kind of invented the storyline themselves. And the connections are like sometimes only like they just need the teeniest little thing to say, oh yeah, it's based on this book, and then like that's it. And I even remember like I don't know, do you remember? Because we just talked about Mystery of the Seven Keys last week. Do you remember like Kalina talking about the like she said, oh, it's the game is based on some, I don't remember what series it was she said, but anyway, she said basically like y'all aren't gonna figure it out because they don't have enough in common, like, so
Actually,
she,
yeah. No, I was
yeah,
just that was the first thing I was thinking of when you were saying that was this previous game. Yes.
yeah, so there is a shift. Whereas I know there's a stay tuned for danger one for sure, and a message in a haunted mansion Reddit posts, like just whole like bullet point breakdowns, and I was actually shocked at how similar the game and book seem to be.
Oh
And
yeah.
I believe from what people have said, my understanding is sometimes you'll even see like lines of dialogue quoted like directly, like that was in the book, and then it shows up in the game. So I think that's important. I think that's just an important thing to note because it means Her Interactive was working more from pre-existing source material rather than trying to be original,
Sure.
which I think does make a difference. And then I don't know. Do you want to talk about Carter? Our patterns.
Sure.
Okay.
I love
So
patterns.
yes, because you are a man of patterns and you love stepping back and looking at the big picture.
Yeah, yeah. So like the first two games have this similar pattern in how they kind of introduce the initial story and mystery that we're about to embark on. Um, and Secrets Can Kill, we are, introduced as we need to figure out who murdered Jake. That's the initial mystery, the story, and that's the same mystery and story that remains to the very end of the game. Like that's our mission. Find out what
Yeah,
happened to
like
Jake.
that is the goal. Nancy, I know like she learns some other things along the way,
Sure.
but her goal the entire time of that game is always just to figure out who killed Jake.
Right, right. And it's no different from Stay
Yeah.
Tuned for Danger. We are here, we are brought in to figure out who's threatening Rick Arlen. And that doesn't change the entire game. From the start to the beginning, our mission, our goal is the same. But after Stay Tuned for Danger, this is when Pattern 2 comes onto stage, and Pattern 2 stays with us for a bit. And this is kind of the method or the pattern that Her Interactive will use in their storytelling in their games, which is it has an initial mystery, but then it introduces another significant mystery, and we have to find out like how the two are interweaved and connected together.
Yeah.
Kind of
And I
like
like to think of
a
it, yeah.
past and present meet in the middle almost in a way.
Yeah, that sometimes happens, but I also like to think of it as it's like Nancy might like she shows up at the start and like this mystery is what has her attention, but then it's like the further she goes, the deeper she digs. Sometimes it almost sometimes feels like, girl, you just got so sidetracked. Like, do you even care about what you came to figure out?
Right.
But then it kind of all like by the end of the game, it just kind of easily wraps itself up. Message in a Haunted Mansion, again, our prototype game. We said in the classic era. That's the prototype. So you remember why she first shows up in that game is kind of interesting because like she's asked to help, but she's also told from the get-go like weird things are happening at the inn.
Mm.
So it's like we walk and we know that they've been having strange accidents. And then of course there's all the hauntings as you're wandering around. So that's what it is like when you show up trying to figure out like, are these accidents? And I think Nancy even mentions it in the opening letter, something about like, are these just like random accidents or is something more sinister at work? So that's kind of what we're focused on at the start, but then the further you go into that game, suddenly it's like, oh no, wait, this house has an interesting history and pretty sure there's buried treasure here. So Nancy's attention kind of shifts to like I feel like our attention shifts in that game. Like we don't really care so much about the accidents that are happening. We just get very focused on like El Diablo, find the treasure. We get to the end of the game and we find out, at least with some of the like major accidents and things, that the culprit was causing sabotage because the culprit also knew about the treasure and was trying to get the treasure. So everything kind of just works itself out. Like then you find out, oh, okay, it was all connected. And then Treasure in the Royal Tower. Now this one is interesting to me. Treasure in the Royal Tower is an interesting one to me because it's like there's not even a mystery to solve when you first show up. It's literally just we're on vacation.
Right.
Get the sense it seems like the library, the who vandalized the library is kind of the thing that gets the ball rolling. I feel like you shift because like she becomes aware of,
Mm.
you know, oh, there's somewhere I can get, and like she gets in and she learns all these things, and then it kind of turns more into the Marie Antoinette and the medallions thing, and then the library, I feel like, and everything she discovers in the library kind of just becomes an afterthought. But then again, you get to the end of the game and you find out culprit vandalized the library because the culprit also knew about Marie Antoinette's diamond
Right.
and was trying to find the information. So again, it's these two seemingly like, what do these have to do with each other? Like we were focused on this and now we're pursuing this, but they do intertwine. And then final scene. Gosh, Carter, what in the world? Like I just have no clue from how that game starts. Like it's a mystery to me. What in the world the problem is? By the, and I'm not being at all sarcastic about that.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't start with something absolutely dramatic in the first five
No,
seconds
that's
of
not a
loading the
dramatic game at
grind.
all. There's not anything life threatening or, time sensitive happening. There's not this poor girl who's now kidnapped and the theater's gonna get knocked down on her. Yeah. So, they throw you head first right into that game's mystery of figuring out who kidnapped Maya. But then there is also they do throw in, and again, I do feel like for the most part Nancy always does keep her attention on trying to find Maya.
Mm-hmm.
But they do also bring in again that side element of like someone besides JJ Thompson seems like trying to figure out who might own this theater, like trying to figure out like who's JJ Thompson's heir, who owns the theater, and does anyone else own the theater? Like does someone have the power to call off the demolition and all this stuff? And then the way they tie that one together is a little bit different cuz like final scene's culprit really doesn't care at all about what's going, like who owns the theater, but at the same time like you need to know who owns the theater because that explains why it's getting demolished, which is the catalyst for the culprit kidnapping Maya. So they do connect. And we have been talking about that, like kind of like the focus, like which mystery is more important. I feel like is it trying to find this treasure, is it trying to find out why these accidents are happening, or what we just said, like kind of the focus shifts depending on the game, but it's still, just keep in mind, just everyone, because we're going to come back to this pattern in particular a lot, that it's more like, again, you have a starting mystery and then you kind of discover a second mystery, and then the game is going to like weave the two together by the end. And then we do also want to mention, like, I find especially not well, it's hard to say what secrets can kill. Like, yeah, I guess like finding out each of the students, like what are they hiding? Like those are kind of their own like little mysteries. But these games will also have like, they tend to introduce like little subplots. Like for example, um Abby is faking some of the hauntings at the inn. That's not what Message in a Haunted Mansion is about. And it really, honestly, they don't really try to make you think like Abby, like she's a culprit because she's faking the hauntings. But they do just kind of like throw it in almost like as a side plot. So you'll sometimes see that with these games too.
And the subplots are important too, because you need reason to believe that maybe someone else could be guilty for doing some of the things that Nancy's uncovering. I feel like when you start
Yes.
exploring some of those subplots, it helps build suspicion on that person. So you really need those different branches of, you know, I guess say dead ends, because you don't go like all the way with them. They're going to meet an end at some point, but they're good because you end up writing that down. You're like, could this
Yes.
person have done this because of XYZ?
Yeah.
So
No, that's actually a great point to bring up. Thank you for like tying that together
yeah, yeah.
nicely. Yeah, I do think that's important because it wouldn't be a very interesting mystery if it kind of just focused on one thing, and it started to become almost like way too obvious, like what's
Mm-hmm.
going on and who's probably responsible for it. But so then they throw in like two things. I feel like it just makes it kind of fleshes things out more. It just like
Oh
gives
yeah.
you more like story to enjoy and chew on when you have all these subplots. But then also, yes, it kind of helps create this sense of like, I can't entirely figure out like who's guilty, because a good
Right.
mystery is supposed to like throw red herrings. So yes, that is a great point. And then yes, as we mentioned, like we'll just mention it to hopefully touch on it in a future episode, that like, they kind of messed around with like, all right, you're gonna like stumble right into the mystery like from the get-go, like, the final scene just smacks you in the face with drama.
Yes.
And whereas, as we were just talking about the game before it, Treasure in the Royal Tower just kind of gently eases you into it. Let's go back to Message in a Haunted Mansion, though.
Okay.
We have said that it's a prototype game, and it is once again. I feel like it's a prototype game in terms of story, because this is the first. Well, it does two things. It's the first game that introduces this idea of finding hidden treasure.
That won't ever happen in another Nancy Drew game.
No, no, we are never ever going to try to track someone's hidden treasure down. Not ever. Yes. So, yes, oh my goodness. So they absolutely fell in love with this idea for several games in these first two eras
Oh,
of
they did.
finding some sort of hidden treasure. But then also, I think you okay. I think you actually had brought this up earlier, Carter, when you were talking about like past
Oh, yes.
and present. Yes, I think we need to come back to what you were saying about that, because I
Oh,
feel like that
yes.
fits in really perfectly. Also, with why Message in a Haunted Mansion is kind of like setting the stage. I feel like for what most of the early Nancy Drew games, kind of how their stories play out.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Well, so Message in a Haunted Mansion was the first game to really start implementing that, and it would just keep going after that. Like you're gonna have this past, almost historical figure to learn about, and you're gonna uncover almost like this unanswered mystery, or maybe they were
Mm-hmm.
misunderstood, and you're going to learn more about them. And somehow what Nancy learns about or uncovers about this past person will help her solve and connect to whatever present mystery is going on right now. And usually the two are connected in some way, like the culprit is trying to find this past historical figure's treasure, or this present culprit is trying to keep everyone away from some location so they can unfind whatever clue is missing for their whatever it may be. It's mostly treasure, but the two are almost connected in a certain way. And so Message in a Haunted Mansion introduces it, and because they start kind of doing this like past and present type of deal, it almost like the way they tell their stories is very something I know you'll definitely want to talk about. It's almost like they're giving you like little bits to find here and there that like leads up to this like big unveiling plot. So maybe you want to kind of like talk more about that, because I know you love to talk about this when it comes to the Nancy Drew games.
Yes, yes, I do. But yeah, I do. I'm trying to think. So I think um, Message in Haunted Mansion, Treasure in the Royal Tower, and the final scene. I think we can all count those as like they bring in something like that happened in the past, and it influences the future, because there's El Diablo, Marie Antoinette, and then like Harry Houdini and JJ Thompson, and kind of whatever
Mm.
happened between the two of them, and what happened with who owns the theater. So yes, that's important to keep in mind. But then this this is something I get really excited about because I think this is where good mystery storytelling really shines. Is your ability to just, I call it laying breadcrumbs. I'm a duck. Call me a duck because I want to follow the trail of breadcrumbs everywhere. And these games established, like these classic era games, Her Interactive leans really well into this idea of like, we're just gonna sprinkle out these little clues and, maybe hints about people's motive, or, maybe something like, we want you to pay attention, we're trying to distract you and like have you misdirect you, and so pay attention to this person. And they're just throwing all these little things, which is what good mysteries do. Like a simultaneous blend of like red herrings to throw you off, but then also just these little like breadcrumbs everywhere that, like, if you're really paying attention, you're like, oh wait, like that's a big clue, I know who did it. And the idea being, in a good mystery, if you give the player enough clues, then hopefully they can like figure it out themselves, or at the very least, like they'll get to the end of the game and kind of when you do the wrap up. I know this happens with a lot of people. It happens with me all the time. Like I'll get to the end of something and be like, now I'm just a big dum dum. Like it was staring me in the face the whole time, and I didn't pick up on any of it. But it all, like, the wrap up makes sense because you realize, oh wait, it's like the clues were there, and then it makes, like, when you replay the games. That's what I get the most excited about. Is I love to replay the Nancy Drew games and try to spot all the little like clues that they were dropping everywhere. I'd be like, hello, like we're telling you right now, like it's so and so, and this is why they did it. Like, wake up, pay attention. But it's very subtle. And I don't know. Also, this made me think about like, I'm just curious. Like, are you the kind of person, Carter, when you play the Nancy Drew games? Because I actually think different people are different on this. Like, are you generally like, do you enjoy trying to figure it out yourself as you play, or do you kind of just, or do you prefer to kind of just let the story happen and then just like, you get to the wrap up and it's like, oh, okay, like cool.
Oh yeah, yeah. Like, well, and it's the answer to this question, I feel like, is almost like loaded in a sense because Nancy Drew games have changed so much, and so like the nature of the storytelling and like how it all unfolds is so different. Because like I know when I was playing classic and golden era games and even experimental, I used to have a notebook and I would write down the characters and I would make bullet points of like why I thought each character was guilty. It's a little, I feel like Nancy Drew games are a bit different now in that sense that maybe you still can kind of do that, but it's a little different. But
Mm.
more on that later. But those first few bundles of games, like, oh my gosh, yes, it was always like why do I think that Red Knot could have done this, or why do I think Emily Griffin could have done this, or why do I think Jeff Akers could have done this? And I would have these bullet points. And the great thing about these classic and golden era games is that they did a really good job of laying those breadcrumbs for each suspect. And you could literally get right up into the very end of the mystery, like, where Nancy makes that last phone call before you knew the ending was coming. And you really could look at your assessment and be like, wow, it,
Yeah.
it really could go to either of them for motive.
Yes.
And so it's, yeah, I'd love to doing that.
Well, and since we're still on the classic era, technically, can we just, for example, let's use Treasure in the Royal Tower. So, run away if you don't want that game's culprit spoiled. Because we're about to spoil it. So, Lisa, I have always now I this is a side note. I don't like love her as a person at all, or really much as a culprit, but I do think Treasure in the Royal Tower, I have always loved the kind of little subtle things like that they throw in about her. Like, hello, she did it. Like that conversation. There's like a phone call you can have with Professor, or a conversation you can have with Professor Hotchkiss, where she'll make some kind of comment about like, oh yeah, that Lisa girl, like she was trying to give me maid service, and I told something about maid service, and Hotchkiss didn't need it. And then when you put all the pieces together of like, wait, someone stole, like swapped out Hotchkiss's medallion. Like you put those two things together and you're like, oh my goodness, like it's Lisa. Or like Lisa's isn't Lisa the one that tells Nancy to like go out to the shed? I'm pretty sure. So like gets her, and then that's when Nancy gets locked out. And so you again, you can just see like they're throwing these subtle little things for you to realize he's the bad girl, or like the Message in the Haunted Mansion culprit, again spoiler alert, it's Lewis. Like when you find that he has that book and he knows about Gumbo Foo, and then you realize like he lied about the translation, like yes, it just, to me, it always feels like you can get to the end of many of the classic era games, and you should be able to have a pretty good idea, like if you care to figure it out yourself, like you can figure it out yourself who did it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And or even actually just thought of Stay Tuned for Danger. That's a unique one because they actually, at the end of that game, they asked the player to make an accusation
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
on someone, which I think is interesting. So it's even like they were giving the player an opportunity. Okay, go ahead and make your best guess on who did it. But the reason why we wanted to bring this up is, and why this becomes important, and even what Carter just said about, you kind of feel like some of the later games, it doesn't seem as easy to figure out who the culprit is. Bear with me for a moment. I'm sorry, everyone. I really like have to put my literature hat on to explain kind of what's going on here, because this actually like fits what's going on with the Nancy Drew games, actually fits into like the very long history of detective novels and how those work. So, have you read any of the Sherlock Holmes stories ever? Okay. So, for those who have read them, or even just for those who are not familiar with them, Sherlock Holmes is one of the very first like detectives in literature, and his stories work a very particular way. The way a Sherlock Holmes story works is basically Sir Arthur Conan Doyle makes it impossible for us to ever figure out who done it. Like that's just part of the way the formula works. We're supposed to be John Watson, thinking that we understand what's going on, but no, we don't have a clue. And the reason why he does that is because then when Sherlock rolls in at the end and he's got all the answers, like it just makes him look extra brilliant. Like, oh my goodness, like you are just the smartest guy in the room, in the universe. I could have never figured that out. Like it's actually a purposefully making it impossible for us to figure it out, because it's just part of like Sherlock Holmes, just because of who he is. It's just part of the rules of the story that he's the only one who has all the information to figure it out. All that, I just said all of that only to say that's not what a Nancy Drew game is supposed to be. The way Her Interactive set it up, at least from the beginning, was they wanted to give us as players, like, we are Nancy. Nancy's not supposed to know things that we don't. We're supposed to know and be able to catch as many clues as she does, like if we choose to. And it doesn't mean that you can figure out every little detail, but we're supposed to be able to figure out enough that, like as Carter said, he in these early games gets to the end and has a pretty good idea of like, I'm pretty sure I know who it is. And that I feel like is very, very important. Maybe not so important right now, but I think it's going to become more important as we get into some of the later eras, because it's going to kind of start to, I feel like sometimes in some of the later games we can just tease this, like sometimes it feels like Nancy and other people know things that we don't. And then you get to the end of the game and it's like, how was I supposed to know that? And so it feels a little bit unfair. So we're just gonna hold on to that. But these early games definitely try very hard to give you just enough breadcrumbs, clues, whatever you want to call them, to work things out yourself. So we mentioned Lisa and Lewis. Stay tuned for danger definitely also makes a very strong effort to let you know, like, spoiler alert again, it's Dwayne Powers. So that's, I don't know, I feel like that kind of covers like the big picture. But now, okay, you and I know we both have been, I feel like, so excited. We always just get excited anytime we
Because
get
it's
to
the
talk about the golden
best
era.
era ever.
Because we do think it's the best era. And in terms of storytelling, Carter, tell me, why is it once again the most superior of eras? What's going on? Like, a whole lot of great things are going on. And I loved working on these notes because I feel like it really just drove home to me, like, oh my goodness. Like, I am so grateful for the people that were working for Her Interactive. And they gave us just the most beautiful, like, boom, 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 one after the other of amazing mystery.
Well, with the golden era, so we're transitioning into this um, very romanticized and loved era by fans, and it continues to reign in its superiority with storytelling because it's kind of building off what the classic era laid as groundwork for storytelling. And it
Mm-hmm.
does this through relying on these very standard mystery plots that we've already talked about. Like, there's a lot of theft, and there's a lot of sabotage, and there's hauntings. And really, where it loves to talk about like story stuff is treasure, which we talked about earlier in the classic era, that like hidden treasure was going to be like a
Yes.
huge thing that would come again and again and again. And in this era, just kind of like briefly
Oh
going
my
over like
word.
hidden treasure stuff, because I know we kind of get a little bit deeper into the story of it. There's Mickey Malone's hidden gold, there's the stolen jewels and the haunted carousel. There's the expensive furs and Danger on Deception Island. There's Dirk Valentine's gold. There's the Penvillin family treasure. So it's just a huge lingering of just treasure.
Literally. They were so, and I did not realize until prepping for this episode, it's like every single one of the games in some way has some sort of treasure
Yeah.
that is very significant to the mystery.
Yeah.
And I love what you said about how this era, and I think we're going to see this as we keep talking about it, that they built on what the classic era established. Like, they didn't reinvent the wheel. It's like they found these things from the first era. They're like, oh yeah, like, let's just pick up this torch and absolutely run with it
For sure.
and perfect it.
For sure.
So oh my
And
word,
and
yes.
and then
If
as
you love
far
treasure,
as
the golden era was made for you.
oh yeah. Oh yeah. And then it also continues with doing like what Message in a Haunted Mansion introduced, which was linking past and present. That continues all throughout these
Once
games.
again,
King
every single
Bacall,
one of them.
Mickey Malone, Rolf Kessler, Benjamin Hawkins, Dirk Valentine, the Penvillins, like it's every single game. It's
Every single one.
this is what they do. And so
Yes,
uh
yes,
I think
yes.
you mentioned a good point if you want to like kind of briefly talk about like how Golden Era, it does have a few like fantastical elements to it, if you want to kind of like briefly talk
Yes.
about that.
Yeah. So one thing that, oh, here's what Carter and I are not trying to say. We're not trying to say that the golden era just does more of the same. Because that actually would have made it, I feel like if they had just kept doing more and more of the same, I actually think that would have made it potentially a very boring era of Nancy Drew games. But it's more
Right.
like They took what worked and they ran with it and they perfected it. But then also the golden era builds on it, like tries its own new things. And one of the things that I find very interesting about the golden era is we did just talk a little bit about, so we had mentioned like golden era has, again, pretty standard mysteries. Secret of the Scarlet Hand and Haunted Carousel have like something got stolen. um Multiple of these games, like stuff's getting sabotaged, like Danger on Deception Island, Katie's boat, and Secret of Shadow Ranch, like all the sabotage that's happening at the ranch. There's lots and lots of things that are haunted in the golden era, like the ghost dogs and the carousel and this phantom horse. And I think also you could throw like the curse on Linda Penvillin under this, and like the Beast of Blackmore, like all of that. So again, those are things like pick up a standard mystery. There's a good chance one of those things will show up. But then the golden era, and this is, I feel like, where kind of like the campiness of these games that we so appreciate comes in, is the golden era kind of will just pull in these very fantastical elements, like some very specific thing where they're saying, okay, we really need you to suspend your disbelief on this. So here's what I mean. I just said the haunted carousel, like it has theft and it has a haunted carousel, very straightforward. But then they pull in, oh yeah, how would you like a robot who's programmed with riddles and knows when you're snooping? And like Miles the Magnificent Memory Machine, is he not just the most wild thing
For the
we
time
have
that it came
ever,
out,
like
absolutely.
for that time? Like he is just the most wild thing ever. Or the next game, which I know we both love, Danger on Deception Island. How would you like an orca who's been enticed into a life of crime? Like, let's stick a harness on it and train it to retrieve shipwreck cargo from the bottom of the sea. Um, so these games, they do sometimes they'll just pull in like these just most crazy over the top things. But here's the difference. And again, hopefully you all are familiar with our experimental era episode. We talked about the experimental era as like that was her interactive's wacky era. They just go kind of like crazy. And I feel like the difference is the golden era games, they'll just like give it to you in little doses. Like, okay, here's Miles. Here's a orca trained by Russians. Like, but we're gonna sprinkle, we're gonna just like throw this into like a very straightforward mystery. Again, something's haunted, something got stolen, someone's got treasure hiding somewhere. Like, so I feel like it's easier for me, at least. I feel like it makes the game just a little bit more like fun and campy, and adds like just that nice little sprinkle of like, wow, this is just crazy, but it's so fun. Whereas I feel like when we get to next week and we start talking about the experimental era, it's almost like from the get go, like, oh my word, you're asking me to swallow the most wild story, and it's almost like it's too much. It's too crazy to accept all the things that the experimental era will ask you to, like, um, yeah, let's just pretend, let's just embrace the crazy. Like,
Right.
if that makes sense. I don't know if you kind of have the same sense from playing these games.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah. Well, and the experimental era stories, they're wild from beginning to end. So,
Yes, yes. And these golden eras just a little bit wild.
right, right, right. And you don't
not
really
not entirely wild.
you don't even really realize like maybe what's wild until like later on, and it's just for maybe like the orca thing, that's not till the very end that you learn about that, you know what I mean? So it's very like, oh, okay, well, whereas like Haunting of Castle Malloy, I'm always going to use it as my example. The whole thing the whole time is just wild.
But then, so another thing, that the golden era also really leans into again is that second like overarching pattern that we talked about where Nancy kind of starts with one mystery and then she finds another mystery and then the game will weave them together. But the golden era again, it's not just doing more of the same. It uses that pattern like really well. But then also some of these games I feel like it starts to kind of play around with it more, which is fun. So here's the ones that are very straightforward. I feel like Secret of the Scarlet Hand, very straightforward. Like the call carving gets stolen. That's the first mystery. But then it kind of shifts to like Nancy's trying to figure out how to unlock the monolith.
Mm-hmm.
Like she still is trying to figure out like who stole the call carving and why. But then she also gets very focused on like there's again buried treasure, not buried in a different kind of sense. Like there's something very important hiding inside that monolith, and we need to find it. So very straightforward. Ghost dogs, same way. Starts with sabotage and these very scary dogs attacking Sally's house, but then the focus shifts to, ooh, Mickey Malone's got gold hidden somewhere. Like we need to find it. And then those two things get connected. And then same thing with Secret of Shadow Ranch. Kind of starts more with like, uh-oh, like bad things are happening at the ranch, and then it shifts more into let's find Dirk Valentine's treasure. So those are the ones like I feel like very kind of straightforward with how they work. Minus what you said like about Secret of Shadow Ranch, kind of does more of a little bit of an easing into it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's more interesting to kind of talk about the games that play around with this second pattern a little bit more. That's where we want to see is how did the golden era sometimes try to do things a little bit different. So, for example, let's use the haunted carousel because this is the first one that I feel like really tried to do something different.
Oh, for sure.
So you agree with me, Carter? Like, I mean, obviously, of course, when we first get there, the whole issue is we're trying to figure out like what's with all these weird things happening
Yeah.
at the park. Like we have a carousel that randomly turns itself on and off, and we have the roller coaster accident. Like all these accidents are happening at the park to the point that it has to be shut down. So that's why Nancy is called in. But then the whole like when Miles comes into the picture, Miles doesn't really have anything to do with any of that. Like his riddles purely are more about like this is trying to help Joy kind of like figure out like work through what happened to her. And then we end up like the further along that Joy kind of gets in her grieving process, then again, spoiler alert, Joy ends up confessing to being the one who caused the roller coaster accident. So those two mysteries, honestly, I feel like they don't really have a whole lot to do with each other. It's almost like Nancy has two completely different things that she's trying to figure out. Like she's trying to figure out what's going on with the carousel, like who stole the carousel horse, why are all these accidents happening, but then also like, okay, like what is Joy not remembering about her past that her father really wants her to remember? So they kind of just they don't really attempt to connect the two at all. It's more just like, oh, let's just give you two separate mysteries.
Oh,
And I still
yeah.
feel like that game works as a story, but it's just different.
Yeah.
Like we're not saying just because you have like you don't have to always make all your mysteries tie together. This is more just like okay, they decided with this one, they don't have to tie together. And then I also kind of feel like Danger on Deception Island.
I think so too.
It I feel like also that one those that one I feel like tends to make the stories feel a little bit more separate from each other too. Like
Mm-hmm.
the sabotage of Katie's boat feels it feels separate to me from the whole like, ooh, let's go on Hilda Swanson's scavenger hunt and try to figure out what's going on. And, you do find out like it's all the same culprit, but again, I don't feel like the game really cares a whole lot to like make those two things like weave together. It's kind of just like,
Sure.
okay, here's a mystery, here's another mystery, solve them both. Have fun with it. But I actually think the best example of this is Curse of Blackmore Manor,
Mm-hmm.
because turns out the culprit of that game and why the culprit was tormenting Linda Penvillin actually has like nothing to do with the whole finding the Penvillin treasure. Like, spoiler alert once again, Jane, all the stuff that Jane does to Linda has nothing to do with the treasure. Like, Jane's just upset about having a stepmom. And, yeah, it just so happens like she follows Nancy down to the forge and he tries to, take the treasure, but really all that happens is they kind of use that as the like catalyst to like make Jane panic and confess everything that she was doing to Linda. So they keep those two mysteries, I feel like, pretty separate from each other. But again, I think it works. Like I think it's fine that Nancy, you know, goes in and she's focused on Linda until Linda decides like I'm not talking to you anymore, and so then Nancy just kind of turns her attention to finding the treasure. So that's kind of a little bit different. But I do also, I don't know, I don't know if you've ever thought about this, Carter, since we talked about Curse of Blackmore Manor. Have you ever wondered like what that game would be like if, say, like Nigel or Ethel were the bad guy instead of Jane? Because I actually have wondered that before, like if how it would feel if one of them had done it, because both of those people, like, they actually have a whole lot of motive to like do bad stuff because they're trying to find the treasure. So I don't know. It's just something I've wondered about.
Yeah, yeah. No, I mean, I've definitely thought about it, when I was trying to figure out who done it, but I didn't actually think it was Jane because I thought there was more motive on Ethel and Nigel.
Yes. Okay. That's so interesting that you said that, because I would like to shout out Southern Sleuth, because Sleuthy actually has a whole hilarious story about this. She went, I think, if hopefully I'm getting the details right, and Sleuthy, please correct me if I'm getting them wrong. He actually went I think, like a very long time without replaying Curse of Blackmore Manor. And so when she finally replayed it, he was absolutely shocked that Jane was the culprit, because she will say, she swears she has this entire vivid memory of getting to the end of that game and Nigel was the culprit. Like, she can't explain it, but it's just one of those things, like it just felt so natural that, yeah, Nigel, of course he's the culprit of that game. He knows about the treasure. So of course he's going to try to find it. So she was completely shocked that it was Jane and not Nigel. So I don't know. I just think that's a fun thing to think about. Again,
For
I
sure.
like Curse of Blackmore Manor as it is, but that is one that I always wonder about. Like, what if they had tried to connect the two stories more closely? How would that work? And then, okay, you brought this up already, but can you tell us more about like how because I do feel like the golden era of all the eras, I feel like, does the best job sprinkling in those little clues, like trying to help you figure out who the bad guy is. Like, I feel like this era, more than any other Nancy Drew era, is the one where you have the highest chance of figuring out who done it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah. Well, I was talking earlier just about how the game sometimes will give you certain certain things that you read or you have these conversations, and they either point you to a certain suspect or they point you away from from a suspect, just to kind of
Like
uh,
a process of elimination almost.
push your suspicion either to someone or away from someone. And so they do that a lot in different ways through the game, through the game, with like Secret of Scarlet Hand. The cultural center director describes Taylor as being like a really shady person, that they were stopped doing business with him. So then you start to think, oh, okay, well, maybe something's off there business wise with him, maybe with that. But then
Yes.
Henrik also references to traveling with a big bunny, and
Yes. Big
Poppy
Bunny.
Poppy Dada's comment about how do you know Big Bunny? So it kind of just like those little things like come together to give you a picture of who Taylor is.
Yes. And the Big Bunny one, I know sometimes people don't always get the Big Bunny clue on
Mm-hmm.
playthroughs, but I do remember the first time I heard that, I was like, wait, that's who Big Bunny is?
Uh-huh.
And it's like the alarm bells are just going off. Like Henrik used to do like travel with this guy. Yeah.
Right,
So
right. And so
then
then
you
once
have
you
one of
find
those.
that out, then you're like,
Yes.
okay, are they teaming up? Is it her? Yeah, you just kind of like go in
Ye-
this whole like, who could it be type of deal.
yes.
So, and then,
Yes.
with Ghost Dogs of Moon Lake, and I'm trying to remember. I think that there is maybe a plaque in Emily's M's Emporium that talks about like how digging artifacts from the lake are illegal, and then she has like a little post-it like note sign on there trying to explain something like, but I'm not doing that, or like by legal means or something along those lines.
Yeah.
That there's continuous like signs that she's obviously hunting for artifacts from the lake and digging it up, but she's always trying, she'll always, but I mean, I don't know, because I don't dig for, it's like those little comments that she makes
Yeah.
that lead you to believe, okay, wait a minute, you keep having to like specify that you don't do something, so are you doing these
Yeah.
things?
And do you remember the notebook that you can find in the dog kennel?
Yeah.
Because that one to me was always, I remember when I played Ghost Dogs for the first time and just like opening up that notebook and seeing like there's all the notes in there about like going out in the middle of the night and listing like the inventory that was found
Right.
and I think also this is I love this one because it's such a subtle clue. And of course also like I don't know. I mean people could make their best guesses based on the handwriting and even the style of the notebook. Like it seems like the kind of thing Emily would own, not the kind of thing Red Knot or Jeff Akers would own. But
Right.
anyway, that aside, but I always also loved in Ghost Dogs, she writes a little note in there about she says something can take a flying leap. And I remember again when I played that game, I was like, wait, we were talking to Emily earlier, and she said like Jeff Akers and his whatever can take a flying, and his rules and regulations can take a flying leap. I'm like, what are the odds that someone other than Emily Griffin also uses like that vocabulary? So that
Right.
to me was
Right.
like, come on, like if it's not her, then what's even Haunted Carousel? Again, I feel like Haunted Carousel does a good job because you have this whole like, that Elliot is always behind on his work. And then you can find that box of horse tails in his studio. That's super suspicious. And he gets all like evasive and defensive if you ask him about it. And he's got that Carousel Horse magazine in his
Mm-hmm.
studio. And I remember he very specifically will not let Nancy look at it when he's in the room. And then you can just tell, I feel like once you get to those email exchanges down in the workshop, like to me I feel like at that point again, if you cared to put all the clues together, like they're making it pretty clear like it's Elliot. And that game also spends a lot of time, I feel like, trying to rule out all the other suspects because they kind of said, to me the one that always stands out is like they really make you think for a long time that Harlan
Mm-hmm.
is a bad guy, but then they resolve it because Nancy ends up talking to his parole officer and finding out what's going on. And then of course like they use Miles and all of that to kind of like eliminate Joy as a suspect. So that kind of thing. I think I just feel like we cannot skip over this. Like I need to hear you talk about Danger on Deception Island because I love what this game does.
I do
It's one
too.
of my it's one of my absolute favorites for how they build up to the culprit in this game.
Oh, me too. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, this particular game tries really hard to tell you and sell to you that Katie is the one that did it. And even in your conversations, I think with Bess and George, who are supposed to be very, don't go one way or the other. They just kind of like give you both sides, and then they go, I don't know, Nance, but that's up, that's you. You're the detective. And with this one, I remember specifically that like George had comments to say about Katie. Like she would like George was like,
It's
yeah,
just like she's a
Katie's
bit of a
kind of a
temper, like
yeah, she's
doesn't
kind of
handle
a
conflict
hothead, and
well
she
or something.
doesn't like da 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 da. And I'm thinking, and then like I remember that either Bess or Nancy comments like, I thought you were her friend, and they're like, well, we are friends. I mean, I know her, but I mean, I don't really know her. And I'm thinking, oh my
Yes.
gosh, this is very 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 telling of what kind of person Katie is, and everybody else in the town has something to say about Katie. And then of course there's all the other obvious clues that you see, when Jenna's cafe gets broken into, and then all of a sudden
Yes.
Katie has Save King stuff on the boat. And then you find out once the cooler in Katie's boat it defrosts and it melts, you find out, you've been feeding the orca, and you can actually confront Katie about it, and she admits to it. And then she actually even tries to encourage Nancy to go home, which is like another like bing, bing, bing red flag. You're like, what are you hiding?
You've gotten too close. You need to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
then you even get to the very end of the game where you're in the sea caves, and there are Katie's gloves with her initials on them. And all of these things pieced together, you're like, it has to be Katie. And what's so great is that once you discover Katie's gloves, and you find the secret layer, hidden passageway in the caves, and you come out of the caves and you call Bess and George that one last time, and it sets
Mm-hmm.
you up for the ending, and you kayak back, and Nancy makes that comment like, oh, she's gone, like her boat's gone. And so you're just, at that point,
Yes.
everyone
Yes.
believed that it was Katie.
I totally did.
Everyone did. You had to have. There's no way you could not have thought it wasn't Katie, because at that point you're just like, she's gone. We found her evidence. Everything points to her. And then you go and you talk, and everybody else is still stationed where they're normally at. Jenna's there, Holt's there, Andy's there. You try and ask Holt, but he doesn't want to help you. Jenna
Mm-hmm.
suggests, go ask Andy. I would love to help, you catch Miss, what does she say, Sassy Pants, or whatever she says, whatever she says. And then you go to Andy, and he's like, okay, I'll help you, but against my better judgment. And then the ending that sets you up for that, like, just very intense, like you're sneaking on this thick foggy night onto this ginormous cargo ship, and you're making a long trek, and you actually see Katie sitting in a chair until you turn it around, and she's been like gagged and tied up, and you're like, oh, like everything that you once knew like melts away, because you were like, I've been duped, it's not Katie. So I
Yeah.
agree with you. I think that game does a wonderful job at misdirecting.
Yeah. And the reason why I specifically wanted us to make sure that we talk about this one is again, this one I feel the misdirection is brilliant, and they
Oh,
go
it is.
so hard on it. But the thing is, and then you might be tempted to think, well, then wait a second, how was I supposed to know it was Andy? But then you realize, oh no, they were very subtly trying to tell you from the beginning of the game it
Mm-hmm.
was Andy, but then they threw in these red herrings so intensely that
Yes.
it's like, oh my goodness. Because to me, the single biggest one, this is so, I just love it when people are gutsy enough to be this in your face about it. They literally threw the Whale World card underneath
At the scene
the
of the
sink.
crime.
They literally tell you from the like usually I feel like a lot of people tend to fix the pipes, like that's one of the first things they do when they play Danger on Deception Island. So you're likely to find that card somewhere at the beginning of your playthrough, and like they are literally telling you to your face, hey, look, Andy Jason, he runs Whale World. His business card is under the sink. He busted these pipes. Um, but we immediately get thrown into all this other stuff and get so hung up in like, what's going on with Katie? What's she not telling? That it's like you kind of just dismiss the card.
Yeah.
And then also he's the one that has Benjamin Hawkins' chip in the bottle. And it turns out, like, why is all of this happening? Because someone found Benjamin Hawkins' notebook
Mm-hmm.
and they're using the information in there. And even also, I feel like the connection of why it works so well, even, this is more from like a writing perspective, but Andy and Katie are the two characters in that game who both run whale watching tours. So it's like they tried to convince you that it's one of them, and when that's their way of saying, "Oh, it's actually the other one." Like they're trying to mislead you, but like they're connected even in their jobs.
Oh
So
yeah.
I could just sing that game's praises for like everything it does with its culprit lead up. And then one other one, we don't have to go through all of these, but I did just want to touch on because I think Curse of Blackmore Manor also does a wonderful, like, subtle job of hinting at Jane's. She's nefarious. She's doing sneaky things because Linda makes that comment about Jane wanted to come in and read the monster book to her. And then there's all that stuff you can track down all this information about, like the guinea pig,
Which I feel like this one's harder because
hamster.
the triggers are a little
Yeah,
bit harder to get.
it is true. It's easy to miss hotspots
Mm.
and important conversations with people, but if you find them, like it's just wonderful because they do all the stuff with like Uncle Roger's
Yeah, with the
toupee,
hair and
like
everything.
with his hair, the hair growth.
And the whole Rome
So
conversation, that's a really big one as far as her feelings about what's going on with
yes,
everything
yes,
and Hugh, yeah,
yes.
all of the things.
I think the golden era, one thing that I appreciate, and I think where the golden era does a better job, like laying breadcrumbs than the classic era, is I feel like the classic era sometimes is almost, with some of them, it's almost like in your face about it. Like, well, of course, Secrets Can Kill literally has, I know there's like, you can spell out Mitch Dillon's name and like it will literally, like, all those hidden messages, the game's basically telling you like
Right.
what's going on, like as long as you figure out the hidden message, like they're telling you everything. And I feel like the classic era tends to just be a little bit more like kind of
Sophisticated.
obvious, and the golden era, some of it is just again a little bit more subtle, but you can still figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
um So that's breadcrumbs. But now, so we've kind of, I think we've covered kind of all the like the ways that the golden era kind of leaned into classic era storytelling
Mm-hmm.
and, did their own take on it. But now we're going to wrap up today. We kind of want to talk about some of the things that are unique to the golden era, because one thing that's very important about the golden era is that it brings in some new storytelling elements that I feel like, again, they give the games more life and just make the stories feel, I feel like, more fleshed out. And one of these is in the area of world building. I feel like the golden era is the one that said, okay, we're not just gonna like tell you, like give you a mystery to solve, like we're gonna do a whole bunch of world building. So you remember Carter from our golden era episode, like remember when we talked about Secret of the Scarlet Hand
Mm-hmm.
and like all of those like firsts that it brought in. So that's relevant to this point. Because let's see, what I remember. Let's see, was it Sunny
Sonny
June?
June, Coco Kringle,
Kringles.
Krollmeister,
Yes, Krollmeister.
Checklist, Frank and Joe, all those.
Yes. Yes. So that actually fits perfectly into today's conversation because, again, we had mentioned in that episode that we felt like this was when Her Interactive kind of did a bit more of an embracing of like, let's kind of build our own Nancy Drew universe
Oh
and
yeah.
let's fill it with little characters and like Krollmeister, like any technology you need to use in this game, it's going to be made by Krollmeister. If you're hungry and need something sweet, it's going to be something that Ezra Wickford Candies made. So that's very relevant, but that's not all. And I would love for you to talk to me because I know we both have lots of thoughts about this. Please talk to me about the joy that is phone conversations
Oh, they're the
in
best.
this era. Oh my goodness.
They're the best. I I love. I think I can't remember what episode it was that I talked about. I think we talked about Hannah and her having the Drew residence and how she has like a voicemail and you can actually, hello, this is the Drew residence. Please leave a message after the beep. And those, even just having a phone call with a voicemail that I can come back to, wonderful. And the emails about what's going on in the world. I love all of those things. And
Yes.
this is
How's Carson doing on his day off?
right. Like
Yes.
this is just,
Ah,
I feel like the golden
do
era
we
just
need those
really,
things? No, but they add
no,
so.
but they add so much, yeah, to the storytelling because it's not, like we go on to, we go like, I'm going to use Danger on Deception Island because I feel like that's always my go-to example for a lot of things. We go to this place as Nancy and we're going to get very, like honed in and focused on this story and these suspects that we meet. But it's such a nice touch to kind of come back to Command Central, like Nancy's laptop, and to read about what's happening outside our bubble because there's an outside world that's still functioning and going and moving
Yeah.
other than just Deception Island. And I think when you do that, when you go to Nancy's laptop and you start reading these emails about, Daddy Drew's day off and how, Carson blew up the kitchen and Hannah has to clean it all up. It's
Yeah.
a great reminder that there's more than just what's happening here. And in your mind, in your brain, you start formulating these details of what's happening outside the world. And so it is world building. Your brain starts connecting dots and making what pictures of people may look like, and you start picturing those things. What does Nancy's kitchen look like, and what does Hannah look like,
Yes.
and you start thinking about it while you're reading these things. And so it's such a great accompaniment to the story. So just some ways that we've like noted like phone calls and emails, like what things are happening.
Yes. Oh, but
Haunted
okay. Before. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Only because you brought up Danger on Deception Island. Because
yeah, yeah,
while you were talking, you made me think of something else.
yeah,
Don't you also love? Because I feel like it's very similar to the reading of the emails. I've always loved in that game that you can get on the website and read like the town news articles about like Holt's
oh
running for
yeah, yeah,
harbor
yeah,
master.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
Because to me that makes it, even what you just said, like, yeah, that's still focused on Deception Island, but to me adding in those little details and even all the stuff, like you can tell, like, they went to a town hall meeting, there was a big blowout fight and everybody's mad at each other. Like,
right,
I always get such a sense like, oh my word, Deception Harbor, like it feels like such a real place with
yes,
real
yes,
drama. Like, it actually reminds me, I know you haven't been able to watch this show yet, but I know a lot of our listeners have. Like, it makes me think of Gilmore Girls. Gilmore Girls is a small town life show which also has very dramatic town hall meetings. Like, so I just, again, it makes even that specific location, like, yes, Nancy is there to solve this very specific mystery, but it just paints this picture for me of this very vibrant, alive community full of all sorts of different quirky people
mm-hmm.
with their things that they care about and they agree and disagree with each other on different things. So
Oh
I just
yeah.
I just
And
I just wanted to mention that because I do feel that fits right in with what we're talking about.
no,
Like
it does. It does.
they did the world building and they brought that location to life.
Oh no, it does, and it's the same way with just the phone calls too. You know, you call
Yes.
Bess, and you're getting these fun little stories about how Bess is obsessed with cooking. She's watching a cooking show right now. This is Danger on Deception Island. Frank and Joe are dog sitting, and they have, was it Goldie? I think is the
Yeah,
dog's
it's like
name,
they find a dog and they're trying to get the owner to
and
come
it's a
retrieve it.
big
Yes.
giant like
Yeah, and the
Great
dog like
Dane or
wrecks the
something.
garage or something, so they're
Yeah,
gonna have to
yeah. So
spend all the reward
these
money.
are all the stories
Yes.
that are being built just by having phone conversations, and the same goes for Shadow Ranch. You know, Bess and George are trying to get to the ranch, and they're having all this
It's a whole
delay.
saga,
It's the
and I'm
whole
obsessed
thing.
with it.
Yeah, it's
They
great.
Yes, every time you call them, they're on a different leg of their journey, just trying to
Yes,
get to the ranch, and I'm very
yes,
invested in like, "Oh my word, when are these poor girls gonna get on a plane that's gonna fly them to Arizona?" Like,
right.
yes, I appreciate so much that they did that, and it is
Hmm.
unique to this era 'cause, you can have some side conversations in the classic era, but the classic era is I feel like much more focused on
Like
like
hints.
we're here to get hints
Yeah.
if we call these people and to kind of like talk through the mystery. Which even that like I appreciate that you can kind of talk about the mystery because then you're kind of getting Nancy like processing her thoughts aloud, which helps us like kind of understand like ooh what should we be suspicious of, like
Hmm.
what should we be paying attention to. But um I just am so obsessed with the golden era pulling in like we're just gonna you know what Nancy's friends they got lives too and we're gonna
Oh
find
yeah.
out like what's going on with them because just for the sake of knowing
Just
that they're
adding.
living their lives.
Yes, and
Yes,
it's
they're
great.
real
So
people.
that's really why the golden era is so good at like world building, is because it's just building on that foundation of the classic era and fleshing these things
Yes.
out. But it even does it more with the historical characters' backstories, which is another way they do the world building there.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Yes. So I think that the best examples of this would be like ghost dogs. I really do feel like they really give you a wonderful picture of like that time period, like Mickey Malone and that time period of like when he was running the speakeasy. Because you can read like William Akers' journal that explains things that were going on, and all the like Vivian Whitmore has some great stories to tell. So even just they took the time to kind of bring that 1920s time period to life,
Oh
like
yeah.
just with the things that you can learn about it. And then of course my baby Secret of Shadow Ranch. Like, okay, yeah, we're just gonna sing the praises of our two favorite games today, but okay, so now let's give Secret of Shadow Ranch its due. Like, I'm sorry, are we not all completely and utterly obsessed with the Dirk, Francis, Meryl storyline?
It's awesome. It's the
It is.
best historical storyline of a character that we receive in any Nancy Drew game for sure.
Oh my god, like they just created these three characters
Mm-hmm.
and they just brought that story to life. Like you get to read the love letters, you get to read Meryl Humber's journal, you get to read Frances's like letter that she writes to her cousin after Dirk is gone and like see how heartbroken she is. And I feel like you get such a full picture of these three people who lived in the 1800s. But I can just envision so well, and even like the details that Charlena tells Nancy kind of about like what she knows about Dirk and what she knows about like what it was like at Cappy's, and I just am always able to just imagine that story so well. And that's why I always talk about like if they ever remaster that game, like I would love it if they would just like do flashbacks or something
Oh,
because it feels like there's a movie. I swear, there's a movie just
it's
waiting to be
very
made
cinematic.
in that game.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and then Curse of Blackmore Manor. That oh my goodness. They literally created an entire English family, gave it an entire family tree.
You can ask about all of them.
You can ask about every single person on the family tree, and Jane will tell you something about almost every single one of them.
Every
And
single.
they all have portraits and their own coat of arms. And then you get into the forge and you find all these journal entries down to like their handwriting. They all have their own handwriting and they all have their own unique way of leaving a message to the next initiate. And then
A massive game.
if you get on Nigel's laptop and if you keep repeatedly checking the laptop as you play the game, you'll see that he is always adding new like details that he's dug up about the Penvillen family, and I just like that. That to me is like the gold standard of the lore that they created. The fact that they just sat down and decided to create a whole family, all the ancestors, and flesh it out to that level of detail. Like, did they need to do that? Absolutely not. But I'm so glad they did, and it just makes that game feel so rich and like huge
And
to
massive.
me.
Yeah. Yeah. They're massive.
Yes. Yeah. And it just I feel like you just step into Blackmore Manor and you can just feel it like in your bones that you have just stepped into like another world and like there's a whole history here just
Oh,
waiting
yeah.
to be uncovered. Like, oh my goodness. Like I do not apologize for the way I am gushing over these games because they really are that good.
They are great. They are
Oh,
great. And see, the thing is
yes.
with Golden Era is that even past that, they even have this wonderful emotional touch to them that they kind
Yeah.
of weave in there as well. And it's great because it kind of almost gives it a more humanistic like kind of feel to it. Like this is not just a game that there's just real human emotion and story to this. And we see that a lot in the golden era as well, like in Haunted Carousel, Danger Reception Island, Shadow Ranch, Curse by Pointer, those four specifically, I feel like they talk about things without really having to talk about them. They're kind of like this undertone of emotion,
Yeah.
with Haunted Carousel, Joy's whole story with her father trying to help her move past her mother's death. I mean, like, wow, that's a very human feeling,
Experience.
you,
Hmm.
you know and the way that it does it, the way that it like tells those details without really having to be direct about it, it's so good. It's so good how it's interconnected with this Miles the memory machine, magnificent memory machine. It's just
Yeah.
it's so good.
Yeah. Or I had already mentioned Danger on Deception Island. Again, I really feel like they bring the small town to life.
They
And
do.
one of the that's one of the best games in the series for kind of getting this sense of like, the ways people in a small town, they got to learn to live with one another. And it's like Katie is an outsider, so like trying to figure out like okay, how she is she going to be accepted into this new world? And even like they touch on this whole like how do we balance the like the fishermen need to make a living but the orca also needs to be protected again, like that's a very real like issue that needs to be worked through. And like again, just Dirk and Francis, that love story, it's so real and so sad. And
So
even like
good.
Meryl's journal, and you
His
can see
tears.
real grief from a father who tried to do what he thought was right and it ruined everything. And so just the heartbreak within that. And then of course, Curse of Blackmore Manor really leans into um, Jane. She's just a young kid and her parents got divorced, and so she's trying to process her feelings about that and trying to find a way to fix a situation that cannot be fixed. Um so yes, I that's such a I just love how the golden era like brings in like those very human, very real details. Again, like because the classic era was more just okay, we're gonna give you a mystery to solve. I feel like the classic era doesn't really make much of an effort to humanize. It's like it's very just straightforward. Solve the mystery. It's like you just played if Scooby-Doo were a game, like you solved it. The end. But then these ones I feel like there is a mystery to solve, but then also there's these like real people with real struggles that all of us as humans can probably relate to in some way, or like we know someone who's faced that kind of struggle. But again, this is something that we wanted to bring this up in this episode just to touch on, because we'll cover it next week. We've already brought this up. Like, once again, this is something that I feel like the golden era does it with a very light touch. Like, for all of these, like all those examples we just shared of sometimes very sad things happening to people. Again, like Joy lost her mom. Jane's parents got divorced. Like those are very sad, painful experiences to go through. But I feel like they don't kind of color the way we feel about the game as a whole. Like when I play the Golden Era games, I don't really have this like weight sitting
This
on top
looming
of me,
cloud over
like
the
oh
game.
my goodness, this is so intense and sad. Unlike, we're gonna really deep dive into this next week, the personal era. We've already touched on this, and Carter, you've already talked about how even some of these choices that they made with storytelling kind of influence the way you feel about the games. That the personal era really went for some heavier, more mature storylines. And what ended up happening is it kind of creates this like cloud that like sits over top of the whole game. And a lot of the personal era games, like you finish them and you're just like, oh man, like I'm feeling a little bit depressed after that. And we can talk about that more next week, but we just wanted to touch on that now.
Well,
and
that's what makes the Golden Era games just so great, is that even though they are incorporating some very real heavy emotional stuff, they still end on this very like campy, lighthearted note. Like there's something very lighthearted about the era, and you can still like tune into those emotions, appreciate them for what they are, but you end with such a great game. And that's why it's the Golden Era. That's why it's the Golden Era.
And it's also why it's the perfect way to end this episode.
For sure.
Ending on a light and wonderful note.
Yeah, and you should join us next week, because we get to start the episode with a bunch of crazy storylines that are very fun to talk about.
Yeah. Crazy. We got some crazy, some sad, everything in between to talk about next week, because the storytelling it's going to keep changing. So this has been a very enjoyable conversation,
and very insightful too, to kind of like think about more about the storylines and like how they affect our gameplay and story and Nancy Drew games. It's great.
Yep. And if you didn't love the Golden Era already, we hope you love it a little bit more. Not to shift aside the classic era, but again, it's like that Golden Era.
Can't beat it.
Lovely. Can't beat it. It's the best.
Thanks so much for listening to our episode today. I hope you can catch part 2 next week, and then our last episode the week after that. We will end our season 1 finale. Bye, you guys.
Bye, everyone.